John, welcome to Beatles Blog. How are you?
I'm great, man. I mean, I don't know if your audience knows this, but we're here at the NAMM show. We're getting ready to do the NAMM show.
You excited?
2016.
You excited?
Am I excited? I have done this so many years, and every year is different. It changes, it evolves, and this year we've got so many great surprises that it's right out there.
Well, listen, we're going to talk about some other things, but I guess since you mentioned it, what are some of the surprises? Share.
Well, I got a couple new drum kits that, if I have to be greedy to say, about the drums, I've got some oak drums that I'm very proud of, and there's a whole story behind that I don't want to bore you with. But it's red oak from Michigan. I'm from Michigan. Most of my woods come from Michigan, and I've got this cherry mahogany drum set that's got so many surprises. I swear, I went to some guys with this drum kit, who don't like anything. Don Henley. And he just likes black drums the way they were, maple, don't do anything special. And Scott Crago called me and he said, I just need something new. I've been doing this gig a long time and I need something new. And we're doing this Don Henley tour. And so I said, I've got this new combination. It's called Cherry Mahogany. And he said, can we make one? Can we do that? Is it okay? And I said, sure, let's do it. I made him a kit, got it to the rehearsal place, because they just finished the Eagles tour, and set it up. And he sat down and started to play this drum kit. And Henley went, whoa, stop everything. Stop the music. And it was like, oh no, something's going to be bad. And he came back and he said, that's the best sounding drum kit I've ever heard. And he got behind it. He wanted to play it himself. So he did. And that's our big endorsement. We said, would he mind, endorsing this and doing an ad for us? So at the NAMM show, you're going to see Scott Crago, who's like the dearest friend of mine, and Don Henley doing this big ad for Cherry Mahogany. And that's something that's new and I'm excited about for this show.
Now, you said this show is what year?
2016.
So it's not 1972, right?
No, it's not. It's a long way from that.
But let's talk about 1972 because something really changed in your life. I think, if I remember correctly, you went for drum lessons. Isn't that somewhat accurate?
Actually, it's inaccurate because I went in 1973. Don had already started his little, that little tiny place called a drum workshop. And I was a drummer and I was just really gonna be a rock and roll musician. I just come from Europe. I lived in Torino where my folks lived, and I went to school in Lugano, Switzerland, and I met the Blocker family. Remember Bonanza?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I lived with the Blocker family, and it was a big deal for us to move to Hawaii because unfortunately Dan had just passed away. Had some terrible illness. And we go there to Hawaii and we get island fever. I can't stand it, right? But I'm a drummer trying to hammer it out. And I thought I was going to be a drummer. So we moved back to Malibu and I look in the yellow pages and I see this place called Drum Workshop. And it was like the smallest print in the world. How I picked that out, I'll never know. Santa Monica, on Lincoln Boulevard, ride my motorcycle down there, walk in the door, and there's Don Lombardi. And it's about 400 square feet, 500 square feet of a place. And Don's got this big beard. He's the coolest looking guy in the world. He had this hair that was like helter skelter. And he goes, let me see what you got, kid. Now, I'm 17, he's 26. So I sit down and I start to play like, terrible. I was terrible. And he goes, look, we're going to start. Put your hand over. Sticks go here. We're going to do traditional for now. We're going to get your fingers working. You're going to get everything working from here. He goes, I want you to go home with this pad, a rubber pad, and come back a week from now after what we've learned here. So I went home and I went, it's a rubber pad. I want to play rock and roll. So I came back, I kind of screwed around in this thing for a while. And he came back and he goes, let's see what you got. And it was all the same stuff again. This went on for 3 months. Just couldn't learn. He could not teach me. And the funny point of this thing is one day he actually, and he'll deny that he ever did this, but he said, John, and Don's not a touchy-feely kind of guy, right, Fred? He went, look. And we both started to stare out over here. And he goes, I've had all these great musicians that have come out of my teaching, and the things that I've taught them and the things that I've told them how to do. And there's been people who go to Broadway, people who go to recording, people who go on tour, television. I don't think you're going to be one of those guys.
How'd that hit you?
It hit me in a really good way. Because you know what? I didn't like the sticks in my hands. For a while I did. But I don't have a lot of upper body strength. And so it was always like painful to me. I loved creating and I loved watching other guys just go for it. But you know what? It was almost a relief. And when he said to me, look, you can work in the shop and we'll do it, because he felt bad for me, I think. I don't know what the deal was. But I was 17 years old. And I started gluing together drum seats. That's our first product. And by the way, I'd had a great life in Switzerland and Italy and all these places. My dad was he didn't understand why I wanted to play drums. Comes from an engineering background, highly technical stuff. And I wound up sleeping on the floor because Don didn't know much about me. It's just I didn't have an apartment. So I slept on the floor of this place. And in short order, I wanted to get off the floor and get into an apartment, and Don had to help me. He co-signed for, before I wanted to have my apartment secured, I wanted a stereo that was huge. And Don had to co-sign for all that. And all of a sudden, Don's like my big brother, right? He's like having to do all these things. I'll never forget it. But it's like he couldn't quite get rid of me. So there was a lot of big brother kind of deals going on when that happened. And there was nobody around. I was there. I had a motorcycle that I drove all the way out from Michigan. And that's what I had, a motorcycle. And I wasn't cool. Didn't have the Easy Rider deal. I had a black suitcase with bungee cords that I drove all the way across the country on. And that's what I had. And Don he probably had his hands full. The more I think about it, it was a lot for him to realize, is this a lot of stuff for me to deal with? And it turns out that, we became good friends. And I finally, leveled off. I was doing things, I was going to school, I was doing stuff around that area. And Don and I just clicked. We started to talk about building stuff. Now, did I know that it would go anywhere beyond that? There was a magic about being able to build something. And Don had this sparkle, he had this great idea that we could make these things. Started off that seat, then it turned into an aha moment about a bass drum pedal.
Now, you know, an entrepreneur, famous entrepreneur, one time told me that any successful business has behind it a great idea. However, one of the components to a great idea is a way to implement it. So at some point, we know the end of the story where we are today at NAMM for 2016 with DW. But at some point, this idea starts to take shape. Talk about that. How is this idea and this vision implemented? Because obviously you had a huge role in that.
Well, I'd like to think I had a big role in that. Here's what happened. You know, Don could beg, steal, and borrow money from our friends and the people around us. And his father was a believer in us, but it was just like really tough, you know. I'll never forget the day when he tried to convince his dad that we were worth $100,000. And his dad's standing there in this little dumpy place, and I got glue all over me, and I'm building stuff, and we got nothing. And by the way, I slept over there last night. You know, he's a believable man. He's an incredible man. And I would believe in him, and I do believe in him to this very day, because he's whole. He's got a vision. He knows where he's going. So we did this together. We rose out of this thing and decided, okay, look, we got a few backers. We're going to move forward here. And he had had these guys playing, or being, students for a long time that were pretty heavy people. I mean, Don comes from the Freddie Gruber School of Academy of, credibility. And lo and behold, I think Don probably told you this on another interview, but it was Tom Beckman's son that he was working with. And all of a sudden, we got this ability to buy this company. I mean, it wasn't worth a ton of money. I mean, Fred was there with us the whole way through. I mean, it's like, it wasn't worth a ton of money, but it was a ton of money to all of us. We had nothing. And we somehow, Don was 26, I was 17. By hook or crook, we got some cash together. We got a little SBA loan. And it was like Paul Real came around, and we there were some players in this thing that were instrumental to the whole story. And we got it going, and before we all knew it, man, we purchased something. And it was the Camco Drum Company of LA. And the next step was, let's start building something in Venice. So we got this little place, and I started building a rehearsal studio because we wanted to just like build a couple pedals and do the drum seats and all this and that. Maybe have a rehearsal place, because Don's passion to this day has always been education. He's an educator, visionary, all kinds of great things. And that was to support that, and it just failed terribly because we had the wrong electrical service for the place, and they threw us out of the damn place. And it was like, oh God, it was rough. And so we thought we were like the Phoenix Rising, and all of a sudden we're in a garage in Gardenias. So I'm in a garage in Gardena. And Don's playing at night, trying to, he took no money. Everything he did, every bit of money he could make went back into, the company, if you could call it that. And we wound up in this garage, and I was there for a while, and it was pretty depressing. It was tough. I was in Gardena, and all of a sudden we broke loose and got a lease on a place in Gardena, another place in Gardena. And lo and behold, we had like 1,500 square feet. Do you know how much 1,500 square feet is when you've been in a box? Well, we went there and we started setting stuff up, and lo and behold, we wound up meeting some people who walked in for a job interview. And I couldn't do it all myself. It was the Arambula family. Ishmael Arambula, he came, and his brother Ildefonso. And you know what? We got these workers immediately, and we all started working together and building these pedals because we acquired the Camco Drum Company pedal division. And we started putting this stuff together, and none of us knew what we were doing. But man, it was cool because we're actually making something now. And so to make something like this suddenly made us legitimate. And my father, who's a big mechanical engineer, he said, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" I said, "Dad, I don't, but I do know this. I know that you're a mechanical engineer and you work in high-end CNC. Well, there was no CNC in those days, but like big, mechanical things. I want to do this. And I never wanted to be like my dad. But all of a sudden, I was becoming my dad. And Don never really wanted to work with machines because of his hands, because he was still playing in the clubs. But I tried my damnedest, to make machines work. And little by little, we got a couple machines, we got some parts, we started making this stuff. We had a pedal all of a sudden, and it went from there.
Now, is it fair to say in the beginning, I think it's fair to say, you're going to struggle, right?
Struggle. We struggled hard. We went out there were moments where there was no money, nothing. When Don could pay me something, it was $35 a week. And it was tough. It was rough, man. It was but Don wasn't taking any money. So it was really a hard time for all of us.
But let's talk about John Good going back in time. We know where you are now. But going back in time, was there a time in your mind where you said, this is either not for me, this is just not going to work out?
There was a time where I had to say, look, I got to do something with my life. I always had a passion for this. I wanted this to work out. But I had to go on the road. No, I met some people through our inner workings of I knew a few things, trying to figure out how I could make drums sound better. And I was taking other people's drums and trying to make, what's wrong with this? Trying to make them sound better. And so if that's what you're referring to, I said, you know what? I can make these bearing edges better. I had a friend, his name was Joe Montanari. Joe Montanari, who's like this guy, goes, yeah, he was my He was my next door neighbor, close by anyway. And we would sit there and he would go, Johnny, if you tap on this drum shell, this snare drum, it's got a high pitch and this one's got a low pitch. You're not going to tune them the same way. Light went off in my head. That's about timbre. Timbre. And all of a sudden I was thinking timbre. Could not live a day without timbre on my mind. And so I always thought it was about snare drums. And lo and behold, you tune this high timbre snare high and this low timbre snare low, you get the most, the best results out of each one of them. I was in a shower one day, and to this day, I always have my greatest revelations in the shower. And I said, maybe I can apply that to drum kits. And that's where timbre matching started. So I started to pull these drum kits apart for these people that I was going to go to work for because they all started to like what I was talking about. They had no idea about these crazy things. But I cut the bearing edges on their Yamaha drums or Pearl drums or whatever drums. And it was like cutting edge, no pun intended, back in those days when you could take a drum kit like that and make it sound spectacular. So it turned into this thing where I could, like with Freddie White with Earth, Wind and Fire. He said, you just changed my drum kit. You changed the whole thing. You want to go on in the studio with us? I said, sure. You want to go on the road? And I'd go to my older brother, Don, and I'd say, can I go on the road? Don, we had no money. He's going, what is he going to say? I got the possibility to make $400 a week. Hair on fire. So I hit the road with these guys. And all of a sudden, I started to really get into these people are recording this stuff. I'm making these drums sound good. And big things are happening. But the best thing that was happening was I was out there on the road, cutting edges, and Don would say, let's play this pedal, see if it works or see if it holds up. And so I'd break it down and throw it in a case and da-da-da. I had the best on-the-job training, experience you could ever have. So I started with them. And the funny thing is like Ralph Johnson, who was like a singer but also a drummer in the band, the other day was sitting across my desk and said, can I get an endorsement from you? It's like so funny. All these years later, they have that guy on the other side of my desk. But that's neither here nor there. I love these people. But man, we did these tours. I toured with Frank Zappa. The greatest experience you could ever have. Because we had to record every single moment on the stage. Rehearsals, the show, after show. Everything you did was recorded, right? And there was a time when I came home from a Zappa tour, and when I was a young buck, I was doing all the wrong things, and I loaded a case of speakers onto some recording tape, and some veteran guy pulled me by the collar out of the truck, and he said, do you know what you've done? And I went, no. He says, you may have erased our whole tour. I was like, oh my God. So when I went home after that Zappa tour, ready to hit the Monday morning at DW, because when you're done off the road, you go back to work with DW and Don and everything else. Frank called me and he said, I need to see you at my house. I went, oh no. Maybe I've done it. Maybe that time in France when I loaded those spare speakers on that tape, I've ruined everything. he said, I need you here right now. So I put my pants on, drove up to his house on Woodrow Wilson, got up there, and I was going to knock on the door, and he opened the door before I could even hit it. He says, I need you upstairs right now. I went upstairs, and I thought, I'm a dead man. I'm a dead man. Now, we were in Helsinki, Finland, and this guy, we were on a hockey rink in February. It was cold, man. And this guy says, whip and post, play whip and post, at the end of our show, a Zappa show. And so Frank turned around and says, do we all know this? And so they played whip and post. I mean, it was like unreal whip and post. And it worked out so good. So every night they played whip and post. So anyway, I go up there and I'm nervous because what's this about? And Frank said, I want you to sit in my seat. I'm going, okay, I'm dead. I'm a dead man. Would you like a beverage? Yeah, maybe a beer or something. Oh, I don't know. So I'm going to die here. He says, I want to play you whipping post. So we played whipping post, and my hair was going, wow. It was like so loud, but it was so good. And it was like Chad Wackerman and the band. And God, they were good. And at the end of it, it was so fantastic. He turns it off and he goes, did you hear the edits? I went, what edits are you talking about? He goes, that went from Paris to Hammersmith Odeon in London to Metz to Rome, back to Paris to London. I said, God, Chad's time is amazing. He says, yeah, Chad's time is great. The way you tune those drums night after night made that possible. He says, I can never thank you enough. And at that point, I realized, some of the things I know and some of the things I'm doing and some of the people you're working with appreciate all these things. And we now are part of this industry, making records, making instruments, making all this happen, cutting a stupid little bearing edge to make it a better drum kit for Frank Zappa. It goes on and on and on. But Ken, you gotta understand, as a young man, that put some fuel in my tank. I didn't get my head cut off because I thought I killed the tape. But I got so much from a man like him. And we went so much further from there. Yeah, we still didn't have a lot of money, and we had to keep trying and working on different pedals and different parts and different things, but it made it fun for me.
Well, John, Don talks about this part in his portion of the feature where DW kind of submerges, comes back, and this is the time now where he's talking about where his son comes to him and says, those few drum sets we were making, we need to multiply this. And where I'm going with this is, you get a phone call, you're on the road, I believe with Madonna in 1987,
Mm-hmm.
and you get a phone call. What was that phone call about?
Phone call was from Don. And I believe I was in Milwaukee or something like that. And we're going to have some fireworks here.
That's because DW is here, folks, at NAMM 2016.
This is a big moment in my life. And Don goes, you know what? The whole family is invested on the line. And we're family, right? I didn't have, my family was so far away and not understanding or wondering if I wanted to do this or if they wanted to support me or what it was. But Don was always there. And, but I'm on the road once again. Now making a little more money, but do I want to be a road guy pushing a case in a truck at 2:00 in the morning, you know, and be 50, 60 years old? And by the way, I've got some friends who still do that, and God bless them. They keep this machine of the rock and roll industry moving along, and they're good at it, and I love them, but my back isn't able to do that. Don called me and he said, the time is now. The time is now for you to come home. Now, I was like involved with some pretty big rock and roll stuff. Michael Jackson, all these guys, Madonna, and they said, don't let him go to like Jonathan Moffat. If you're happy with this guy, we want you to be happy. There's tons of money to be made. We'll pay him very well. And I was on the phone with Don and I said, Don, I can make a lot of money finally in my life. And he goes, I want you to come home. And I got 40 grand a year waiting for you. And I said, but they can, he says, I don't want to hear anything. It's your choice, but it's our time. The biggest moment and the best move I ever made.
No regrets.
None. None. We've created a family of DW that I swear is a unique place for people to work, for people to create, to be able to express themselves. I think that our company, and by the way, our average employment is over 10 years.
I remember Don mentioned there's longevity with your employees, which tells you something.
It does. I go through this place, you know, and now we're fast forwarding to all these years ahead, these great years. It's like you couldn't write the script for such a fulfilling, wonderful time of my life. And I hope Don's life and his family, you know, there are children coming up, you know, Chris's kids. I mean, Chris Lombardi has turned into a incredible visionary for business. You know, he's done so much to take us to the next level. You know, Don, he hates this, but I'll always say he was the greatest plumber in the world, because drummers always want stuff to go where it can't, and Don Lombardi always found a way to make it go there. I'm the guy who has a passion for, and I'll never let this go, to make things easier for drummers and find the sound that's available for anybody. If you can dream it, if you can think it, I'll deliver that sound for you the best way I can.
When was your aha moment when you realized this is going to work? This is it.
I'll tell you something. There was a long period of time where we bought drum shells from a great company. And it just turned out that I wanted to be able to shift on the fly. I'm a very impatient man. And so we took we dove in deep and bought these machines. And it's like, a really hard time, in our music business to decide to make a big investment, because it could go bad the next year or the next day, or whatever it is. And I suddenly bought these machines, and I'm trying to learn how to make veneer work out to be at the tones I want. Well, there's no manual to tell you how to make cylindrical plywood. I don't care where you look or where you go in this world, it doesn't exist. So Sean Smith and I, is this guy in my shell shop who's a great man, and he's been with me, and I always want him around me. We go and we buy these machines, and they're very archaic, right? And nobody wants to tell you the glue, nobody wants to tell you the pressure, nobody wants to tell you the heat, because they don't bloody know anyway. So we get these machines, and what the hell do we do with this? And we start, and where do I buy the raw materials? I mean, I had to start from scratch, and damn it, I've met some of the greatest people in my life that you'll ever want to know through this process. This has been the greatest thing for me. But the biggest aha was after I found out that, I'm making a drum shell like the drum shells that we bought from other places. Okay? That's the way everyone does this. And I thought I was being cool, and I bought some curly maple. Now, curly maple has got a figure that's vertical and a grain pattern that's horizontal. And every curly maple drum I made, every one had a low timbre, boom, 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 down here. Why is that? Now, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I suddenly realized maybe it's that vertical figure in the grain. So Sean and I went, let's just take the maple and turn it this way. And the pitch dropped tremendously. That was an aha moment to me, like going, it's not just about the thickness of a shell and cross lamination, it's the grain orientation. And that, you should have been around me then. I mean, I could have lit a planet on fire. It was so great. It was like a great aha moment. Then we can go this way, we can go this, oh God, it goes on.
So when we sit here in 2016 at NAMM, on the eve of NAMM,
Yeah.
when you look back now and you remember sleeping on the floor, you remember $35 a week, and now you look around and you say, perhaps one of the best drummers in the world, Neil Peart, is playing my drums. How do you feel looking back at that?
Well, you know what? Number one, it's tough to look back only because Don and I never did. It's tough to look back and go, God, you almost didn't make that. We didn't know whether we were making it or not. If I have to say to myself, how do I get from here to here? We have no bloody clue. We just had a great time getting there. And all the things and the people who taught us things and the players that were involved were fantastic people. Some of them are here with me now and some are not. In this very room where we're talking, I had Jim Chapin snoring on a couch right here. I had Freddie Gruber here. I mean, I've had a lifetime of people who influenced, allowed me to do my thing. And I gotta tell you, not a lot of people, and let's face it, doing the math, not a lot of situations could add up to what I've been able to do. I'm not a genius. I just know how to take things that I've learned and put them together. And that's how I guess we got here. And through all that, when I go to this show, I still set up. I want to go tune every drum set in there. As long as I can, I will. And I still feel like I want to be part of that. We've got a tremendous support crew of people who go and do all these things. Maybe I'm probably in their way, I don't know, but I always want to go remember how this was when it wasn't so favored and nobody really knew who they all were.
Maybe that's what I've noticed in sitting down and talking with Don, that's very clear with you, is that the passion that comes through DW is still there. We're almost still in that 500 square foot space that so much detail goes into this product. That something tells me that you and Don, if you never made money, would have still made great drums and would still be doing it.
You know, I'm glad you said that 500 square foot. Every time I walk out of my office with somebody, a guest or whoever it might be, and I open that door and there's all my people, and like I said, most of them have been there a long time, and the bloody place is the size of a Costco. I realize how lucky we all are, and the contribution that we've made, and how I love the drummers and the people who buy our products, buy our instruments, and hopefully the lives that I've touched and made a little easier by Don being a good plumber, by me being a bad drummer, and a guy who knows something about pitch in a drum show. We made that better.
It's been a good ride, John, but it's not over with. You know that. It's not over with. In
You
a
won't
few
be-
days.
You won't believe what I got going. It's not even going to be over there yet.
Well, we don't want to spoil that for our viewers. That's for our next installment.
Maybe our next time.
Maybe our next time. But listen, we want to thank you for a few minutes. It's a great story. It really is. It's a great story of success. It's a great story of perseverance. And it's just a great story of passion, because it's obvious in talking to both of you, you never gave up. And now it's paying dividends. But it's paying the right dividends, because you have to look around and say to yourself, there's a lot of really good guys playing my product.
Some of the best, I think, in the world. And you know what? They call me on the phone, and just like they'll be in all these exotic places and sound like children, saying, "Do you know how great this sounded tonight? Thank you so much." I mean, and I just go, "You just woke me up." But you know what? Thanks a million, because that's what I wanted to have happen.
Well, John, from the drumming community, thank you. And it's the great John Good from DW Drums, guys. So we hope you enjoyed part 2 of the Heart and Soul of DW. We thank you so much for your time. Keep up the good work and have a good time in NAMM.
I will.
All right. Thank you, John.
Thanks
Appreciate it.
again.